Hello, and welcome to our most recent edition of Theology Thursday. I'm Pastor Chris Laughlin, joined as always by my co-host, Pastor James Smith. I'm of Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Allegan. Pastor James Smith is of both St. John's Lutheran Church, Three Rivers, and Trinity Episcopal Church, Three Rivers. And I know it seems like we invite the bishop, or only ever invite the bishop to join us, but he is our liturgical expert. He literally has a PhD in this. So we are joined once again by Bishop Satterlee because we want to talk about Advent. Thank you very much for joining us, Bishop Satterlee.
It is always a joy to be with you.
I enjoyed this as well. So, Bishop, we talked several months ago now about what Lent is, where it came from, it being a time of repentance and renewal. What then is Advent?
Advent has similar roots to Lent. It was a pre-Christmas time of penitence, getting ready for the birth of Jesus. Probably 4th century, it began to emerge. And when the date of Christmas was fixed in the West, it became more set. So it was a penitential season. And many of us still have those memories and roots. It's like everybody, the culture is celebrating Christmas and we're not singing Christmas carols yet. With the liturgical movement, it changed to be more of a season of hope. So rather than being penitent, it would be a season of hope that because Christ is coming. And now I think these days we have almost a 2-track penitence and hope running together. So maybe we would call Advent hopeful penitence. I like that.
I do too. But can I back up just a minute?
Sure.
You mentioned the liturgical renewal movement. Was that back in like the 70s?
Yeah, post-Vatican II.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I know I'm a liturgical historian, but dates, now that I've been a bishop, the room in my brain for dates has been taken up with other things.
No worries. I'm just thinking about like, I mean, Lutherans more or less rediscover the liturgy about that time. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So I've been a pastor since 1987, and we were talking about changing the color of Advent from purple to blue.
Okay, that's helpful.
New idea.
I appreciate that, because
which means it could be 20 years old, but it was a new idea. You know.
Right. But I remember I'm born in 1984 and James was born in 1990.
Yeah.
So all we've known is
this.
Is blue. But I have preached, I want to say it was a Presbyterian congregation where they were still using purple paraments.
Right.
I say still, there's nothing wrong with it.
No, not my cope, which is the cloak cape kind of thing that I wear for Advent, is purple. It's not blue. Now my stole and chasuble when I preside are blue. So I can do both.
So does that,
I think it's sorry. I think it's interesting that at least the gospel lessons still reflect the penitential mood for the. So you always get the second coming in week 1, and then usually John the Baptist weeks 2 and 3, who's quite hardcore.
Right.
And then you get the happy Jesus one that everyone was expecting all along in the 4th week.
Yes.
I guess the Old Testament readings often have the hope, like these Isaiah readings we're doing are quite hopeful, but you can definitely see that dual track that you're talking about, I think, in the readings for the season, which are surprising to people who are used to thinking of it as just a countdown to Christmas or just about hope.
That's right.
It's more than that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So then Pastor James brings up a good point then. What is the connection, Bishop, between Advent and Christmas? You said it sort of has an historical link, but sort of liturgically for us today.
Yeah, so so you got two things. Advent is the annual reminder that Jesus is coming again. We say in the Creed, he will come again to judge the living and the dead. And it's kind of a reset. I look at it as a reset because we all know Jesus is coming again. We know we should be vigilant. We all know that we should love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and our neighbors as ourselves. And we forget. And so Advent is kind of or we become lax. Advent is kind of the church's reset to remind us that Jesus will come again. And as I said on Take One this week, we may not be around for Jesus coming in the clouds for the whole world, but Jesus may come. We may meet Jesus, and Jesus may meet us in the instant that we get the cancer diagnosis, or we're at the nightclub and somebody produces a gun. So we live in the awareness that Jesus will come again. And that is, I think, the second coming emphasis of Advent. And then kind of, some would say that a second is Jesus comes to us in word and sacrament. So Jesus comes to us every week. And then finally, we recall Jesus, we prepare for Jesus to be born as God incarnate, as the babe wrapped in swaddling cloths and laying in a manger. So it's a check on all of the meanings that the winter festival has. And I've begun to think of Christmas time as the winter festival, because we need to be honest that in our culture, Christmas has many meanings more than the birth of Jesus.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
I figured out in high school that there were lots of people around me who didn't believe in Jesus at all and still had Christmas celebrations.
Right. Yep.
I actually, this is on my own sort of soapbox for just a moment, I prefer when they call it something like Saturnalia or Yuletide or something, because at least it's more honest.
Yeah. Yep.
So then, I mean, you talk about it as a time of reset, of repentance. There really is then a strong connection between Advent and Lent.
I think there is. Yeah. I mean, when I grew up, Advent was a little Lent.
Oh.
Yeah. When growing up, I was taught Advent is a little Lent.
Interesting.
Gosh, I remember what I was taught. That's pretty cool. My pastors would be proud.
Hey, something stuck.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I mean,
so I think there's something about, Jesus in terms of the second coming. I think if we're seriously believing that Jesus will someday show up in the world, and certainly will show up at the end of our lives, and we need to be ready for that moment, that hour. I have some penitence to do always. I think the church has penitence to do. And I, looking at the state of our culture, think society has some penitence to do.
And I think it's about recognizing our need for the second coming, which I think many of us Americans don't, because we've got it pretty good. Like, at some level, most of us know that buying something isn't going to plug that small hole in our hearts, but that's not the message of the quote unquote Christmas season, which is totally that if you find the right Christmas gift, or even a more wholesome image, that time with family is going to fix everything. And I think Advent is a good way of reminding us that we in the world really do need Jesus. I remember my liturgy professor, Dr. Oldenburg, used to talk about a lot of the more recent Advent hymns are of Latin American origin. And part of the reason is they realize that we need Jesus to come again. And it's kind of like we don't, because we're a lot more like Rome in our society, both for good and for ill, than we are like the ancient Israelites who could constantly see how many things were wrong.
And yet I think at some level we do know we need Jesus, because we're not fixing the climate. We're not getting guns under control, right? We are on the other side of a pandemic that, I don't care what people tell me, is not over yet. So I think if we take some Advent time and reflect, we do see we need Jesus, right?
I certainly need some Jesus. In my life.
The notion that we can figure it out and we can fix it, it's a great theory, but I don't know if it's always workable. And in my work, congregations are increasingly coming to terms with the fact that their church has a lifespan, which is a new concept. We need Jesus.
Desperately.
What does faith mean if my church isn't there?
Put differently, how can we worship the Lord in a foreign land?
Yeah, that's right.
Psalm 137.
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry, something occurred to me while we were talking. Is Advent becoming a different thing in the culture as well? And the reason I ask that question is because I'm thinking about Advent calendars that really have nothing to do with nothing to do with anything except a new piece of chocolate every. And don't get me wrong, last year Rachel got me the Star Trek Board Cube Advent calendar, and I really liked it, but it didn't have anything to do with Jesus.
No, it's counting down to Christmas. Right. Yeah.
Well, you will not find an Advent calendar that starts on November 27th, even though that's when Advent starts this year.
Right. December 1st, right?
Right. Exactly.
All December 1st.
Yeah. Yeah, it is countdown to Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think you can find an Advent calendar with anything you want in it.
Oh yeah. Chocolates, alcohol, absolutely.
Yep. Cookies, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And please understand, I'm not anti-cookie.
Oh no, I understand.
No, I have several of those. I have a tea Advent calendar that came in the mail, but it's
that's lovely.
It's understanding that that's something a little different from the actual meeting, So, but I think the question is, can we hold the true season and the consumer season side by side? The same question as Christmas, and we always think we can, and I'm not sure we always do as well as we think we're going to. I think you see it creep in all the time. Sorry, that's my son Timothy there, who's already in a sleeper outfit that has Santa on it. So there you go.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And maybe trying to hold the two in tension are another indication of why we need Jesus.
Certainly John in Revelation would say that.
Yeah. That we can't figure this all out on our own. And why we need Advent.
Yes, speaking of Revelation, Chris and I both do this same series of lectionary readings, and recently they had Revelation 18. And there's just a great scene where Babylon finally falls, and the merchants are all weeping because there's this list of like 65 different items that they sold and were available in the marketplace that there's no market for anymore. And it's kind of like, well, shoot, I think I'd kind of like to live there, where I could get my silk or my wine or, my so-and-so. But it really raises the question, okay, what has a hold on us? And maybe that's a good Advent question as well.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a part of the penitence, right? Because there's lots of things that have hold on us.
Yeah.
Or that we give ourselves over to that are also not Jesus.
Yeah. Yep.
Does that mean that the disciplines of Lent, the practices of Lent, the fasting, the study, the abstinence, that's the fasting, pardon me.
Prayer, fasting, works of love, giving alms.
Those would certainly apply then in Advent as well.
And I think we don't see a lot of fasting going on in Advent.
No.
But we certainly see works of charity and giving alms, giving money to help the poor. We certainly see that in the weeks before Christmas. Yep.
And that's the tough thing is I think there are parts of secular Christmas or whatever you want to call it that we can just reject out of hand as antithetical to the gospel. But then there are other parts where you can kind of see, well, actually, this is what the season's about. So I think I've heard sermons that kind of go too far in the direction of saying it's all Sodom.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Thank you for that corrective, James. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we love Disney. You all know that. And we usually do a pre-Christmas Disney trip, which is probably the most secular of Christmas celebrations there is, except when you go to Epcot and they have a Christmas concert with a choir of 300, and they read the Christmas story interjected with Christmas hymns.
Wow.
And except for the sacrament, I come home from that going, I have been to church.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And people line up to do it, to go. So there is still a real urgent need for the story.
I had no idea. That's amazing.
Whoopi Goldberg once read the Christmas story when we were there. And at the end, the reader says something. I call it the sermon. And she said, you don't have to believe any of this. But if you believe just a little bit, hang on to the little bit of belief, because it'll make your life in the world better. Whoopi Goldberg. So maybe Advent's about just cherishing that little bit of belief. Stewarding. Yeah.
And I appreciate the reminder that I'm not going to be able to do it. Not going to be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Gentlemen, I think we've covered it.
And the last thing I would add is everybody wants their kid to have Santa and all that fun, and that's a good thing.
I would also add, though, that Christmas is not about the kids, or it's not just about the kids. Christmas isn't just for or about the children.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, you could say it was about one kid.
Right.
That'd be fine.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I think now we'll really see it at Emmanuel, at least who watches or listens to this. I think on Christmas morning, I'll actually do the genealogy of Jesus from Matthew. And Jesus had a family too.
Yeah.
Pastor James, do you have anything to add?
I don't. I don't think. I think we've covered it all. I think the most we can really ask at this point is if among all the busyness, you could actually reflect for a moment on your need for Jesus, not just the cute baby, but the Savior of the world, and obviously the world's need for Jesus. I think that's about the best preparation for Christmas you could have.
Well, I'm really glad you said that, Pastor James, because I would also like to say, like, he came for a reason, and according to Acts and Peter and John and Paul, he came to die. The baby's cute. He came to die. And I
just get in trouble because if we're talking about the lectionary and the gospel story, at least we're in the year of Matthew. It doesn't take long for Jesus to be born and Herod to seek to kill him.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anything I'm glad you brought that up, Bishop. Is there anything to the, I know it's not in the hymnal anymore, but I know I do love the Advent hymns. I think the Advent hymns are fabulous. But in any case, I know it's not in the hymnal anymore, but We Three Kings of Orient Are, the line about myrrh I bring its bitter perfume, breathes the life of gathering gloom. I mean, I kind of like the interpretation of the gold, frankincense, and myrrh out of that hymn.
Yeah.
Of course, I think all the great hymns of Advent and Christmas are about, sorrowing, sighing, bleeding, dying, or, nail, spear shall pierce him through, a cross be born for me, for you, from what child is this? So.
Yeah, they point us beyond the manger to the cross.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we good, gentlemen?
This is fun. I think you got me ready for Advent.
I think you got us ready for Advent. So we hope you'll join us again sometime in the fairly near future. Pastor James and I are thinking about other topics.
Yeah.
If you ask, I'll come.
Let's see. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Merry Christmas. And do we want to go with a penitential, a thoughtful, a hopeful Advent? Probably all three of them, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.